Hey everyone, welcome to the Actor's Guide to the End of the World podcast, where we talk about acting in Hollywood in a way people understand. I'm Ikon Song, and this is
Rian Chi Kelly. How you doing?
What's up, buddy? As always, follow us wherever you find your podcast at Actor's Guide Podcast. We have video on YouTube, on Substack. Follow us on all social media at Actor's Guide Podcast. Leave us a like, leave us a review. It really helps the channel. Today is a very special episode. We're having our first ever guest to the podcast, Oscar-nominated writer Kirsten Sheridan. She also has directed incredible films, has a hit show on Hulu, Say Nothing.
Also, a graduate of Mount Temple Comprehensive School, like myself.
For the Americans, that's high school. So we got deep Irish connections here. We talk about so many things in this episode. What it was like to work with a 25-year-old Cillian Murphy. You should see these casts in her films. It's really incredible. She also talked about what it was like to grow up on Daniel Day-Lewis film sets with her father, legendary director Jim Sheridan, directing.
We also talk with her about building a filmmaking community, which Kirsten has done in Dublin with The Factory, now Bow Street, and she is launching something similar in LA this summer.
So needless to say, Rian and I hit a home run with our first guest. We're pretty much just going to quit after this episode.
Thanks and good night.
Without further ado, please enjoy this conversation with Kirsten Sheridan.
Kirsten motherfucking Sheridan!
Hey, Kirsten, thanks for joining the show.
Hello.
I don't know if Rian mentioned to you, you're our very first guest.
I kind of thought I might be, but I was like, oh my God. How exciting, freaky.
I'm so excited.
This is a huge deal for Rian and I. Not so much for you, but it's a big deal for us.
Yeah. Also, we've been staring at each other's faces for 6 months doing this, and it's great to have another human being in here, let me tell you.
You got to throw someone else in the mix.
Yeah. So everyone knows Kirsten Sheridan, Oscar-nominated writer.
So they say. Apparently so.
Yes, they do.
Depends who you slip a 20 to, you know what I mean?
So also, you directed incredible films. The casts in your films, we're going to talk about all these amazing actors that you worked with. Recently, you have a hit show on Hulu, Say Nothing, and then you also teach acting as well. So we have a lot to dive into.
Yep.
Yeah, we're going to talk about your incredibly strong neck muscles from wearing all these hats, which is quite unbelievably impressive. I am just blown away by the magnitude of the talent.
Oh my God. Well, honestly, when you say the cast thing, it's the one thing that I'm like, yes, I have worked with amazing actors. But I kind of feel like nothing to do with me. I'm just so lucky to have been like involved with all of them, really, from people who are complete unknowns to like stars. It's been great.
Yeah, I rewatched Disco Pigs this morning to remind myself, because it had been a long time since I saw it. What a film. My God.
So mad when you rewatch. I mean, how do you feel as an actor? When I rewatch, I see every mistake. I see it, like, not from the acting, but from my part in it. I'm like, not enough money, not enough time. Why didn't we X? But like, what do you see as an actor?
I feel exactly the same about stuff when I watch stuff back. I'll critique my performance from the lens of who I am now and what I've learned now, of course. Mm-hmm. But from an outside perspective, watching that film again, it's a great film. It is mental. And like Cillian, I mean that in the best possible way, but Cillian Murphy, like both of them, they're both mesmerizing it. Like they're two super actors, and it's just put together beautifully. The script, obviously, like, it's written by Enda Welsh for anybody who doesn't know. But it's brilliantly directed. I forgot how it made me feel at the time when I watched it, and I was like,
mad.
Oh yeah, it is a wild
just
film.
real quick for our audience, Disco Pigs was essentially Cillian Murphy's first real major role on screen, I believe.
Yes and no. There's a tiny wrinkle in that one. He had actually been in. I cast him in Disco Pigs, but another movie was made just before Disco Pigs, which was a movie by John Carney, actually. So Cillian played the lead in that movie, but it was in Disco Pigs that he kind of got to play. Yeah, he had obviously already played that character on stage so powerfully that I think Disco Pigs was like, his real kind of meaty role that he could revisit,
Yeah, remember, or like kind of realize there is something sort of otherworldly about him on screen in that, particularly in that film. He's just like,
one of the things he he was so amazing at even back then was, you know, I would look at the playback on the monitor and he would come in and look at himself but in this incredibly objective way where he'd be like, do you see that? I think I need to up that by like a little bit and I need to take it down there. And I was like, wow, I hadn't worked with an actor at that point who was able to kind of craft their performance and watching the playback in cahoots with the director. And I was like, Jesus, okay. So that was amazing. Yeah.
Which is interesting because that kind of brings me to, you know, a question about, so both of you, I mean, at that time, you were in your 20s when you directed that?
Yeah.
That is, I mean, to direct a movie like that in your 20s, you know, where does the confidence to direct something like that at that age go, you know what, give me the reins to this thing because I can do this? And you did, but like, did you always have that confidence or was that something that you sort of like...
I've always been a big-headed bitch, Rian. No. No. You know, it's really weird. It's kind of like the trick for me, and it's not even a trick, it's just kind of like a happy accident. I kind of feel, and this is an actor's podcast, so you're going to think that I'm like making this up to kind of make actors seem like the best thing ever. But I truly believe that like actors are out on such a limb and it's a terrifying place to be. And I kind of feel like my maternal instinct really kicks in. And I feel like I just want to like support them and not make them feel like they're doing the most terrifyingly vulnerable thing in the world, which they are. And so I totally just forget about my own like worries in that, you know. I'm just like, number one, I had Enda's script and I adored Enda as a person, as a writer, everything. And so I was like, I only felt like, Jesus, I better get up and make sure I do the best for the script. And then when I'd be on set, it never really occurred to me, like, how do I feel being 26 or 23 or whatever I was on set? Because I was like, is Elaine okay? Is Cillian okay? Is the little kid okay? You know, like, so yeah. It's kind of handy to have that mother thing going on, you know?
We actually talked about that recently when we were discussing directors on set and how they feel their role, whether it was TV or film. Can you talk a little bit more about, when you said the maternal instinct, is that kind of how you feel the relationship is as yourself as a director when you're on your set?
Yes and no. I mean, I've spoken to Rian about this before. I kind of feel like, depending on the actor. So like some actors want you to be yes, absolutely, the mother hen. Other actors want you to push them. Other actors might push you back. And it's all part of the actual process, you know? And even sometimes they're not conscious that it's part of the process, but you better be conscious that it's part of the process as a director. Like, I've had actors start fights with me because they want to see that I can be like, nope, we're going to go for another take and that's it. You know, like, and that's not my normal happy place, but I'm like, so you kind of have to be a chameleon, and whatever is required, I feel, is like, sometimes you have to be the dad, sometimes you have to be the mom, sometimes you have to be the best friend. Sometimes you leave them alone, you know? So yeah, it really is for me, just like, chameleon.
Yeah, it requires a great deal of skill and sort of just emotional intelligence to be able to read people and to be able to work with them in that way.
Right. Yeah.
Kirsten, would you say, because going back to Disco Pigs, because that was like, you know, mid-20s, did you feel like you had that skill and you knew that was a skill even back then on directing Disco Pigs? The need to be a chameleon and kind of work with specific actors and kind of hone certain things depending on what they needed?
I think looking back now, like, this is where you see the mistakes as a director. I think I almost made the mistake of almost giving line readings in my 20s, you know? I was like, so specific to in the weeds. And now when I think of it, like, I'm like, I would never be that in the weeds. I think that is just a learning curve of age and craft that, like, you learn, like, you know, that is not how someone wants to be directed.
Yeah, I think as an actor too, you kind of learn, but just as you go, you get less precious about it because you're like, oh, it's not as, you know, I don't have to be as specific as that in that way, I think.
Yeah, and then, like, if an actor does want a line reading, like that's fine. I would do that. But I think in the kind of bigger scheme, the one thing, I mean, everyone always is like, what's it like having a dad being a director? But the one thing that I can really say I did kind of learn by osmosis is that it's so okay as the director to be like, I have no idea. I don't know. What do you think? And then suddenly the crew are all like, I think this, and the actor's like, I think that, and everyone's kind of involved and there's an energy going. And then you might be like, oh, that's exactly it. What you just said mixed with this, and let's put like 10% on it. That's what we need, So I think that was really helpful, because I think so many young directors are terrified that they need to have all the answers. And the more they let go of that.
I love that.
Those are the type of sets that I love being on, because in the moment, the director might not always have the answer, but as a collaboration, everyone is trying to solve the problem at hand, and everyone together can get through it.
And I think there's nothing worse I can imagine as an actor. Like, again, I think actors are out on a limb. So they're kind of like kids to me, like 2-year-olds, but in a good way. You know, the way you can't lie to a 2-year-old. So like, if you're lying to an actor pretending you know the answer to everything, I think it's nothing more terrifying for the actor, because they're like, oh, they haven't a clue. And they're like acting all like, put this there, do that. Like, oh no, they're pretending to be the director. And that's
kind of breaks the trust.
Vibe. Yeah.
You talked about having a dad who's a director.
Also, sorry, just to know, legendary director Jim Sheridan.
So just back to the start. So you grew up in New York for a little bit too, right? So born in Dublin, lived in New York.
Yeah, we went to New York for the 80s, which
good time to be there.
That was when Times Square was Times Square. But yeah, New York in the 80s, honestly, we made a movie about it. We didn't have AC. Everyone was broke in the 80s, but I think Dublin was Ireland was a hard place in the 80s. And so even though we were broke in New York, it was probably more like light and energy and colorful than, the things that people were dealing with back in Ireland in the 80s. So yeah, my dad was in theater for that whole decade. And then in the 90s, he got into film. So then we went back to Ireland, and it was a whole other ball game.
That's interesting. So do you remember much of New York? Do you remember much of that time? And
yeah.
Obviously,
yeah.
We'll get to In America, which is a stunning film. But so you've memories of that time and how it was.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, when you watch the film, you're like, that didn't happen like that. We didn't win the ET doll. We lost the fucking ET doll. Like, hang on. Loads of stuff like that, But yeah, a lot of it is very close to the truth in a weird way.
Okay, so before we dive into In America, can you kind of walk us through the first experience you had on set?
Yeah, that's a mad one. Because it was in the theater first, right? And so I was the kid who would sit in the front row and mouth the lines for the actors, thinking I was a big help. So I'd be like 7 years old, being like in the front row, and then they would say, will you please put that child up into the lighting box, because she is distracting us so much. So then I'd sit in the lighting box, and I thought I was the kind of master of the lighting box.
And those are plays that your dad directed?
He directed and sometimes acted in.
Okay.
Yeah. There's a mad funny story about him acting in one of the plays. But when my mom went into labor with my little sister, and anyway, I'll tell you that later. But
okay, all right, go. We'll get to that off air.
The acting story later. But the first set experience on film set was it was a mad one. It was Daniel playing Christy Brown in My Left Foot, and I was an extra, but I got to observe Daniel, and I would help feed him sometimes. In my memory, maybe I made this up, the way memory works, but in my memory, I was playing his little sister. And so at lunch, you would need to help him put stuff for eating. And I remember once at rap seeing him walking off, and I was like I had forgotten that he could walk.
Yeah. But what an incredible experience to see, and maybe confusing for to be
Yeah,
that
yeah.
age and see method acting up
Yeah.
close, that level of it, which
That level.
I don't know that anybody gets close to his level of that.
Yeah.
Was it weird coming back to Ireland after New York? Was it jarring? Like, had you gotten used to America?
Yeah,
Was it kind of...
yeah. It was, in New York, I was like, we don't understand her accent. And in Ireland, it was like, you think you're fucking great American. Do you?"
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, it was always a little in between.
Yeah. And then you went, we actually went to the same school, same secondary school, high school,
right.
if you're American, Mount Temple.
Oh,
It's
nice.
so
Shout out to
small
Mount
in
Temple.
Ireland, isn't it? Mad.
Yeah.
Bono and a lot of you too went to Mount Temple. And
Absolutely. Yeah. Sorry, just to keep it chronological for a second. So you came back to Ireland. Your dad starts working in film. You're around that.
Yeah.
Were you kind of immersed in it from then on? Do you feel?
Pretty
or-
much, yeah, pretty much. Like I kind of, do what I do now with my kids. Like I use them as guinea pigs when I have a pitch. I'm like, sit down, okay. So, and then I go into a hole, and they're like, yeah, well, they say the wildest things. They're so much smarter than I was. But when I was that age, I was like reading scripts and giving feedback, and then like obviously my left foot exploded, and I didn't realize the impact. I was like, what age was I? Like 13 or something. So I didn't really get how big a deal it was, on an international scale.
You were like reading scripts and just immersed in all that, even at that age?
Yeah, I would say from 13 on, like, because then it was like The Field and Into the West. And my dad actually said for Into the West, he was like, I'm going to write this movie and it's about kids going across Ireland on a horse. So we're going to get a horse and go across Ireland to research it. And I was like, amazing. And I still have not forgiven him that he had not done that. We didn't get to do it. Yeah, then once it got to In the Name of the Father, it all just kind of took off, I suppose,
Wow, what a childhood. Can you talk about the first moment where you knew that you wanted to be a director?
Yeah, I mean, I was as a younger kid, I was mad about photography and music and the concept that I could somehow bring photography and music together. So that was like my goal in my head. But I think, honestly, probably the whole Daniel experience. And once I started seeing working directly, like on the ground floor with actors and just that whole dynamic. And my dad did plays even when he was back in Ireland. And my uncle's a playwright. And I was, the assistant director on my uncle's plays. And so I think just seeing the psychological work with the actor is probably what got me really hooked,
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. What a great way in as well. And it shows.
Yeah, what an education.
And had you been writing the whole time? Did you always write, or was that something that kind of... I know we talked about this before.
I still don't like to write. I have to have a gun to my head.
Wow.
I mean, I like it, but there's people who like going to the gym and they're like, I'm going to the gym. And you're like, what is wrong with you?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. I am one of those.
People.
So you actually do gravitate more towards directing versus writing?
I did gravitate towards directing, and then I opened the acting school in Ireland and kind of got with John and Lance and Shimmy and Jerry Grinnell and kind of got immersed in that. And then I had 3 kids, and so writing became like a much more manageable world. And being forced into the writing world, actually, in retrospect, I did so much more work at like finding your voice in the writing world. Like directing,
Yeah.
I was doing Enda's play, I was doing my dad's thing, I was doing other people's stuff. And now that I've been a writer producer for the whole time I've been in LA, which is 12 years, I'm like, oh, now I have what I want, in terms of voice.
Yeah. Let's, if you don't mind, just chat about the acting school for a minute. What did that come out of? Or like, really, like, I just, how did that come about?
That came about because John Carney rang me and was like, I'm bored. And I was like, I'm bored and I'm lonely. And he was like, me too. Anyone else? And so I was like, I just saw this movie called Kisses. Let's call Lance. Maybe he's bored and lonely. So we called Lance, and Lance was like, okay. So the 3 of us, 3 directors got together, and we ended up in a position where we had a free building in Grand Canal Dock for a year. So
It's a
it was
beautiful spot in Dublin, by the
beautiful
way, for
spot,
anybody.
but like a 10,000 square foot building that was freezing with pigeon shit everywhere. And like, it was like, why would anyone want this? And it was before Google and Facebook and all those
Yeah.
people moved into that area. So we had this building and we opened the doors and we were like waiting for all the writers and directors and the filmmaking community to like bang down the doors. And then nobody came, but then a wave of actors arrived. And we were like, what do we do with these people? And so it just happened that organically that we created an acting studio, which was just a once a week like meetup of actors that was invite only and totally free, like throw £5 into the bucket for the heat, which we can't afford. And actually Jack Rayner was one of the first people involved in that actor studio. And then from the studio, we suddenly, a year later, we were like, shit, we got to pay rent on this building now. So let's start a year-long actors program. And that's kind of how that started.
And just so for those that don't know, this is around 2010 or
2010, 2012.
Was this originally the Factory?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
It's called the Factory. Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, you mentioned Kisses there. I was a location trainee on Kisses.
There you go.
So I stood out overnight telling me where to go for. And I was like, you know what? Fuck this. I'm going to still be an actor. I don't like this.
Yeah. Yeah. Location trainee is a rough one.
Can we go back to In America for a little bit? Because nominated for an Oscar for writing, how did that project come about? And also, you know, your father directed that film. Incredible cast, Samantha Morton, Paddy Considine. Can we talk about how all that came about?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I'll try and do this the shortest version I can. But basically, my dad always wanted to do a story of us going to America. And it was this kind of fun family goes to New York. Oh, look, they've no money. Oh, the 80s. It was kind of like a funny, just episodic story. And he couldn't crack it because he was like, what's at stake? Like, what's the internal journey? What's the emotional journey? It's not about family going to America. Like, who cares, you know? Even though it was a love song or a love poem to New York and immigration and all of that, but there just wasn't enough to get into it, you know, meat on the bone, I suppose. And so then he was like, he's going to take his childhood and marry it with his adulthood. So my dad had a brother who actually did pass away from a brain tumor, but it was his brother. And so he turned it into his son in the movie. So it was this strange combo of generational trauma brought into the heart of the movie. And then it became a much deeper movie about letting go of death and, you know, starting anew and all of that kind of stuff, you know? So he used like the table, the things on the table for our actual life, but like underneath it all was his childhood.
Oh, that's brilliant. So it had a lot of emotional depth. Yeah. And writing on that, you know, how was that for you? How was the process of that?
It was, I mean, this is the one thing this is what goes back to you saying like Oscar nominated. You feel like such imposter syndrome because I was like, I wrote a diary of what it was like being 12 in New York, like, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And my dad he's very funny about it because he'll say like, he wrote this whole script about this main character called Johnny. And then he read our scripts and he was like, you wrote me out of my own movie. Like, I am nowhere in this movie. And we were like, well, yeah, you were at work. Like, mom does everything. So, you know, so we wrote him out of the movie. But then in actual fact, like, he took a combo of like things from my script. I think I was like only 16, the first draft I did. And then by the time he made it, I was pregnant. So I was like 26. It was 10 years later. So there was so many iterations between 16 and 26. But the really interesting thing, which I think you guys would be interested in the most, is that we had a blueprint of a script. And then he got Paddy Considine, who plays my dad, to set. And Sam Morton couldn't come. I think she was on Mission Impossible, actually. She still had the shaved head and I think she was on set. And so I had to step in and play Sam's character in improv rehearsals with Paddy. And so some of
Wow.
the best moments in that movie are improv moments that my dad would, he had a little camera, kind of like the little kid in the movie. Like he had his little video cam, and he'd throw me into the scene, and then he'd throw Paddy in, and then he'd come in and pretend to be Djimon, which it was really weird because I was playing my mother, and I was pregnant with my daughter, and
Wow.
she was pregnant in the movie with my sister. So in terms of Freudian therapy bills, it was next level.
Yeah. It's a brilliant movie if anybody hasn't seen it. It was the first movie that I went to see on my own in the cinema.
Oh,
I'm
wow.
not great at doing stuff on my own.
Wow.
And I went to see it on my own, and I remember just crying in the cinema. I was like, thank God I'm on my own here.
Oh my God, that's wild.
Incredible. I'm not even Irish, and I felt so connected to it.
There you go.
Well, I think it's an American immigration story too, right? For like everybody,
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
But that was just a really interesting eye opener to see like how the actors can contribute. Like Paddy brought a lot of his own ideas and his own personal experience to those improvs, and that's again like I was watching going like everything is kind of accepted and welcome when it all fits together.
Love
Yeah.
that. Can you talk about how long was the rehearsal process? And I mean, you said the first draft was 16, and I guess it was made when you were 26. So how was that 10 years, and how long of that was rehearsal for the film?
I mean, I feel like most writers, like when you can't crack it. So I think he put it away for a long time and then came back to it and was like, I need to insert the story of the dead child at the center of this movie. And after that, it kind of started to, kind of gain some traction and some energy. And so the rehearsal process with Paddy would have been really short, like only a couple days. Yeah,
Right.
but
Wow.
but even in that rehearsal, it was like there's a scene where Paddy comes in and he confronts Djimon, and it's a great scene where he's like, and that was all in the rehearsal.
Yeah. Another great actor as well, Djimon. My God.
Yeah, for everyone, Djimon Hounsou, who was just he did Amistad, but he was essentially blowing up around that time as well. So the incredible cast just for that film alone.
Yeah,
And Sarah Bulger, right? Was it Sarah Bulger?
Sarah and Emma, two
and
actual
Emma,
sisters.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah. Brilliant in it.
And we're going to move on, but for In America, just the process, you're nominated for an Oscar. At what point were you like, I can't believe this movie's actually getting made? After you had the script and drafts for so long.
I mean, I think that happens to everyone on every movie, doesn't it? Although I think, like for me, it does. I'm like, it takes you 10 years and then, but I think my dad hit a wave that was a really sweet spot in filmmaking. And I hate to say that wave is not there anymore. I think there's always another wave. So, it might come with different structures in it. But I think like the 90s into the early 2000s, if you had made a few good indie films and you had a name that you're very good working with actors, it was like, yeah, it was a different, right? There wasn't the streamers. There was like a way to get things done. People were taking risks and all of that kind of thing. So, sorry, I don't think that answered your question, though.
No, I mean, that's great, though, because we definitely want to dig into that later because we talk a lot about the industry on our show.
Just going to say that's, like that, it is a big change. We've seen it and you've seen it. And like you say, I am hopeful and optimistic that there will be another wave of sort of independent filmmaking like that again. In the interim, how have you found it? Because, on our end, it's like, what we're going for is kind of different. TV and streaming is even different. Being in LA right now is very different. I don't know what your experience of that is as a writer and a director and a producer, but like as an actor, there's a lot of pessimism around at the moment.
Yeah, I know.
Have you had to kind of how have you adapted to that? Like how have you how has that changed your sort of day to day? How you approach things, how you pitch things?
Right.
Has it made much difference?
I mean, there's so many different facets of that conversation, isn't there? Like the first one that comes to mind is mental health.
Yeah.
It is so rough, like when you're a creative and you're in a transition period or whatever the hell you want to call this period, waiting for the next energetic wave, you know. It's a tough time for sure. And I suppose that's part of the reason why, like, I love collaboration. I think that keeps me sane. So like, obviously I would love a job in a writer's room, but failing that, I will start a writer's group with people who are also feeling incredibly isolated, you know. Um, and yeah, it's just, that's part of one of the reasons that I would want to start a filmmaking community in LA. I mean, LA being one of the most diverse, but also the most disconnected cities on the planet. Um, and so, yeah, I think it's crucial. And I guess on a creative level, it's really good and really bad. I think the really good of it, I hate to say it, but it's like it really makes you dig so deep. And that's not something I want to do. Like, who wants to have to do that? It's not fun.
Absolutely. But I think that's a really good point, because I have found that, like, the sense of community, when I say people, there's a sense of pessimism, I mean that because, you know, me and Ikan are in class, and we've talked about classes, me and you, Kirsten. Like, and I think, you know, at a time when there's not a lot of work, I think that for a lot of people, maybe that's the first thing to drop off, and I understand it from a financial perspective. But what it's given me is a sense of community that I didn't really have in the same way before I was doing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I have a sense of community. There's a sense of we're all trying to improve and to work, you know, to get better at what we do and to make things together. You get to hear about people making their own stuff. So I love the idea of you kind of laying the groundwork to create this community here, because you're right. I've never heard it described like that, but you're absolutely right. LA is wildly diverse and so disconnected. And it feels like now more than ever, when a lot of people have left, you know, there's a lot of uncertainty. There's not a lot of stuff getting made. But if a community comes out of that, then that's a phenomenal thing, you know.
And I also think that's incredible for even for our listeners to hear. When you talk about the grind and needing to dig deeper, I mean, your career is incredible. Oscar nominated all the way back in America, but now you have, we can talk about Say Nothing now. You just had a hit Hulu show that's getting nominated for awards. Your career has gone through decades at this point. So I think it's encouraging for others to hear that it's still a grind and it's still really difficult.
Yeah. And you still think, no matter what, like, will I ever work again? Like, every time I start a new screenplay, I'm like, do I know how to write a screenplay? You know what I mean? Yeah. Shit, how do I do this again? You know, and it's just the process, right? Like, and it happens every single time. And I remember someone saying to me, like, about the different rung, like, we're all just on different rungs of the ladder. Like, my dad is trying to get financing for whatever movie he's trying to make right now. I'm trying to get financing. You know, the person that might come to me for mentorship is trying to get financing for a movie. We're all trying to keep our energy up. Like, there really is no golden key, no golden moment. And if there is, it will probably disappear. Like, so, like, you know, unless you're one of 1% of people who just are always working, like, I feel like you have to be really careful that you don't say to yourself, like, when I get there, I will have made it, you know, when I get X. Because it kind of, you're just constantly on a ladder, no matter what rung you're on, you know, and that's not a bad thing. So, yeah.
Not at all. And hearing other people, I like talking to you and talking to other actors about it, like, really helps you. It helps me understand that, where I'm like, okay, we're all just doing this stuff, and I get to sort of just be grateful for what I'm doing right now and go, this is just the thing that I'm doing right now. It's not, happiness is not far off in some, because the goalposts move all the time.
Yeah, all the time. Exactly. But I think creatively what it's done, which is, you know, again, like, I'm thankful for it, but it's like being thankful for, like, the hardest thing in the world as well, because, you know, there's so much noise now. As a writer, you have to have a voice that is so distinct, and also can't be a device. It can't be like, you know, like style over substance. So, like, yeah, it has to be authentic and, like, so deep that it can, like, break through the amount of competition. And the same as an actor, right? So, like, it's a lot to ask of a person to dig that deep, but that's where we are, unfortunately.
Yeah. I heard someone say the other day, a few weeks ago, I heard it somewhere where someone said adversity is a privilege, and I'd never heard that before. And I haven't stopped thinking about it. I'm like, oh yeah, that's really interesting. Like, to be in a position to have adversity in this, especially in this kind of career, is a privilege. I don't always feel like
If
that.
you can use it. Yeah.
Exactly. If you can use it. Yeah. Sometimes I'm like, what the fuck is
What are we
this?
doing? I know.
Yeah.
This might be a good time to talk about Say Nothing. This is a hit show for Hulu. Can you talk about how all that came about and what the process has been like?
Yeah. So, well, I guess it came about because this author called Patrick Radden Keefe wrote an incredible book called Say Nothing.
It's brilliant.
I mean, I hadn't even read it.
Yeah.
And I can't believe, like, as an Irish person who's like grew up, with all these stories all the time, like grew up about like hearing about the IRA, hearing about the politics, hearing about the British, the occupation. Like, my dad had made like multiple movies about the subject matter, and I had never read the book. And so a writer friend of mine here in Los Angeles put my name forward to be part of the team. And so, I went through the usual process of being interviewed and sending in samples and all of that. And then we did a small writer's room. I think back then they were called mini rooms. I don't know, but we did that for like 20 weeks and broke the story. And then there was only 4 of us, which was amazing because sometimes there's 10 people. And so, yeah.
When you say broke the story, just for people who don't understand that term, what does that mean in writing?
I guess it means like we knew we had at the time 10 episodes, 9 to 10 episodes, and like how to take that 40-year history and put it into 10 episodes without losing the thread. And I guess what Patrick had done so well was pick out 4 people to tell the entire story of the North.
Yeah, it's incredible, and a great cast as well, and really, a really successful show.
And yeah, I think the fact that he took people who were on the same side of the divide was what was so smart. Like, it wasn't black versus white, us versus them. It was like show the victim, and show the perpetrator, and see how it can affect both of those people on a human level. And that was just so welcome.
Now, keep in mind, I'm a silly American, right? So
absolutely, 100%.
This is a really polarizing, highly political. Can you talk about the response after now that the show's come out and what? I mean, obviously, great directing and great writing, and the show's getting great reviews. But like personally, have you? What has the response been?
Well, it's funny because Patrick is an author. I think he's an Irish background, but I think he's from Boston. And Josh Sedimer, the showrunner, is from San Diego, I believe, like a very California guy. And originally I was like, how are they going to get this? How are they going to understand the level of complexity? But I have to say, like, hats off. I don't know whether it was the ton of research they did or whether just somehow they were plugged into the characters in such a way that it is a universal story of like when you're in an oppressive situation that you make certain choices that you then have to live with for the rest of your life. And that's a universal story, no matter what conflict you're talking about. So,
yeah.
So I guess the response, one of the responses that was amazing to me was, I heard a podcast, and I can't remember which one it was, but it was some young English people, and they were like 20 years old, and they'd such like, it was all that, and I was like, to hear young English voices like say, God, I didn't know that was. I'm not going to try to do the English voice again.
So far, you're 100%. It was great.
Not that good. But to hear them say like, I had no idea of this. This is part of my country, and I had no idea this was going on, or like this was an eye opener, or like I felt like I understand why she took the route she took. That for me was just kind of like wow, because it really made me feel like it is a new day. Like I was my brain is still in 1990. Like when I left Ireland, probably, like, or when we came back or whatever, I'm still to some degree burdened and privileged with all of the information about the past, and they're not. And so I was able to listen to that podcast just like, oh my God, it's such a different time, you know?
Wow.
That's really interesting. I actually took part in a documentary when I was about 14. There was a documentary made called When Peace Talks, and I think they took like 10 of us from Mount Temple, 10 from Belfast, and then I think it was like 10 from Warrington, where the IRA bomb had gone off.
Wow.
And they followed us around. We went to Glencree and Wicklow. We all met up there, and then they kind of took us around. We went up north. We went to the Falls Road. We went to the Shankill Road. We met the Northern Ireland secretary at the time. We met, was it Mary Robinson was president at that? We met a lot of leaders, but we also did like just activities that teenagers would do as well. And we talked a lot about the conflicts. And what struck me was like the kids in Belfast were obviously like lived it and were so well versed in it. We had a fairly good awareness. Everybody from the south had a lot of awareness about it. The kids from Warrington didn't know anything. They didn't even understand why a bomb had gone off in their town. You know what I mean? So they're not taught about it. History in England is not taught in the same way at all as our history. And they were clueless about all of it, which was kind of really eye-opening for me at the time. So it's great to hear that people understanding it now, because of something, you know, that you've created and helped create. Like, that's really powerful. Like, that's a big deal.
Yeah. I mean, it's there's so much to say. If I start on say nothing, I'll just stay in it. You'll be like 20 years later. And then.
Yeah. Oh, two of us just close our laptops. All right.
Like in 1983, do you know what happened? But I suppose, like, ultimately, you know, I mean, one of the amazing things, like, I think when you step back from it, you're like, the fact that globally, the Good Friday Agreement, which was the peace agreement that brought together the North and South finally, is kind of like seen as a moment in global history where like people who are ethnically, like, you know, irretractably at odds actually made an agreement. That's kind of an incredible thing to realize that your country and your countrymen were actually a part of that, you know?
Yeah, it was a big deal. Yeah, I remember even just the feeling at the time, and like the kind of, and also economically at that time, Ireland was kind of coming out of a shit period. We talked about the 80s earlier, but it was like the 80s was rough in Ireland. And the 90s was a time of kind of hope, for want of a better word, but it was just money started to come into the country for the first time ever, which we lost our minds with for a little while. I remember, like, when I was in college, everybody was like, I don't care, I'll just throw this job away because another one will be along any second now. Buying property in Bulgaria and everything else.
Yeah.
But it was a really optimistic time, and everything sort of funneled into that. You know, the Good Friday Agreement was huge. Also, Ireland went to the World Cup in 1990 for the first time ever, and then again in 94. There was so much, and I remember it as a ton of optimism at the time. I don't know if you had the same kind of feeling, but in my mind, the 90s was a real time of optimism in Ireland.
Yeah, totally. Well, it couldn't have gotten much worse than the 80s.
Fucking right. Sorry, go ahead, Akon. I know you've a lot of questions prepared. But
I would love to talk about Ireland in the 90s, but I do have to, sorry to spoil your guys' party here. So I do have to ask, we talk a lot about the globalization of the Hollywood industry or the film industry. Can you kind of talk about your experience now that you worked on a Hulu show that obviously it's shot mostly in UK, I believe, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about just what you're seeing on your side as far as how the game has changed with streamers? We can talk about how there's an explosion of things shooting in the UK, in Ireland.
Well, it's so funny because, like, it's hard to move to LA. You know, you got to get a visa. Then you got to pay the LA rent. Then you got to be like, oh, shit, my friends live in Eagle Rock, which from the west side might as well be Galway, like might as well be across the country or wherever. Like, so you do all this to get to LA, and then everyone's shooting in Dublin. You're like, what the hell is happening? So that's kind of weird. But I suppose, like, I wish I knew more about the, the financial / economic policy side of things, and where it's all going, and had a glass ball for all of that. But I suppose what I've noticed more from a creative point of view, because that's probably where my brain first goes, is like, I remember being told a little while ago in relation to streamers that like it has to be completely authentically local and completely globally universal at the same time.
Wow.
And you're
Wow.
like, oh, but then you see like a great show, and you're like, I see exactly what you mean. You know what I mean? And I mean, there has been an incredible Irish wave, I guess, when you look at Kneecap and even
Yeah.
Say Nothing, and, some other things. I mean, there's more things that have been coming out. And obviously the actors are like, firing ahead and paving the way. And so, yeah, I think it kind of goes back to the question of like, of doubling down on your whether it's your culture, whether it's your whatever it is, whatever your this sounds so woo woo, but whatever like your true essence is, like your energetic signature, whatever the hell you want to call it, like if you don't double down on it, like what's going to happen? I think you're probably just going to kind of disappear into the vanilla kind of mid, right? And so yeah, I'm kind of like more extreme these days. And then you have to be careful that you're not just trying to do shock value extreme, right? So like, it's got to be authentically extreme. And whether that means like just extremely vulnerable, like I feel for a while, especially with women, that there was this kind of, we had to have authentic vulnerability in the Phoebe Waller-Bridge sense. So like she had to go out on such a limb personally and be so exposed. I was like, really? That's the bar? Like we have to go that far?
Yeah.
That's asking a lot, and there was like other, like you look at Baby Reindeer,
Yeah.
Right.
like
I love that too.
it's so good, but like the mental health question there too, like I hope it's cathartic,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
maybe it's really difficult too. I think it's both. So
That's-
yeah.
That's a great point. I think, because I've learned, or I've been told in the last few years, particularly being classic, the worst thing you can be as an actor is like forgettable. If you go in and do a believable general performance,
Yeah.
you're nowhere. You're nowhere.
Yeah.
If you're not specific, either be comically bad and be remembered for that, or be, hyper specific and memorable and make choices. So that's I think that's the same across the board. Like,
It's funny. It's funny you were saying that, because incredibly authentic, but also incredibly universally relatable. That's also in America. That's kind of in America to a T.
Right.
It just so happens that now with streamers and so many channels and TikTok and YouTube, there's so much competition. And how do you make your way above all the noise and try to make a great piece of art? So
Absolutely. That's the $1 million question, isn't it? Yeah. And the only answer I've found is to like go deeper into that level, whether it's cultural voice, personal voice, vulnerability, how far out on a limb you're willing to go as a writer is exactly the same question as an actor, in my opinion. I mean, of course there's craft, and you can learn craft to some degree. And I've been trying to do that for 20 years. So I get that part of it too. Like there's actors who can turn up to set and do what, they're like just genius craftsmen and women. So, but I think if you're a creator and you're trying to punch it like out of that mix, the amount of people, I do think there's only one way to go, and that's inside, right?
Yeah,
There you go.
absolutely. And I love the fact that like I feel like you never master it. Like no one's ever gone, all right, I'm good now. I've learned enough. That's me. I've got it down. Like everybody's still trying to get that, get whatever that next little bit of that next level is.
Totally. And actually I've seen the flip side where you get to a level that you can't reach again. You're like, oh my God, when I was 21, when I was 32, whatever it is, when I was 8 years old, I did like it's scary to reach that moment where you're like, oh, I guess I made it.
And sometimes it's just who you were at that time. Like I often think when I came to America the first time, I was 25, I think it was 2007, that I did things that I wouldn't dare do now out of sheer ignorance and like not knowing any better.
Ignorance is bliss.
Exactly. Yeah, there's a bit of that I wish I still had.
I remember seeing a Bryan Cranston interview, and he was just, I think that was one of them, just like, he's just in it for that 3 minutes. And then after that, it's like, I don't care.
You're talking about the audition?
Yeah,
The audition?
about the audition. Yeah. And then actually we had Danny DeVito once come to us in the factory, and he was talking about what you were talking about, Rian, like, yeah, we were all pissed off, and then Danny DeVito came one day, and like it was the best day ever, and we were like, it kind of saved the day. But
Danny DeVito always livens the party up.
He took like a picture of his foot. He does this thing called troll foot, and I was like, he did troll foot in the factory. This is like absolute claim to fame now. But he talked about one of his first auditions where he was like, I'm going to roll into the room. And so like he made an entrance by just rolling into the room, and he's like, they're not going to forget that one.
Be careful, everyone. Do not try that. Do not try that at home. Danny DeVito is a professional.
I don't care, dude. I'm using it.
So this is a perfect time. Can we talk about the what you're building in LA and your teaching classes?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm hoping to, I guess, like, I'm basically starting quite small this summer with some workshops that I'm doing a couple nights a week with actors. I've done a lot of research and development about like what's working and what's not working in LA, and there's a lot out there, and there's a lot of gurus. Some I'm sure are great, but I guess my kind of philosophy has always been like, if you've got 30 different actors, you've got 30 different methods, because that's just how I am on set. And so my thing is like kind of hand selecting and curating a group of people, and whatever that grows into, whether it grows into just a filmmaking community, whether I get an investor and find a building and it turns into like an art center, like all of these things are kind of welcome. And I kind of guess I trust in the process that organically, as long as I'm open to it, it will become exactly what it needs to be for this city.
Yeah.
That's
and
exciting.
that could be like writers, directors, actors. It could be informal. It could be formal, all of these things, all of the above. And so I've reached out to just various places here in LA that I'll possibly partner up with. And just have a space is what would be great.
I had classes. I don't know that there's community in the same way where people are just kind of meeting and making stuff,
Right.
Like the factory, like the Attic Studio was, at one point in Ireland, and and both.
Yeah, it makes no sense. You're like, there's directors that just graduated UCLA. There's the AFI Conservatory. There's the Sundance Lab. And then there's actors sitting at home on their own. It's like, this makes no sense. Like, why? It's so easy to put these groups of people together so that things naturally, organically bubble up. And, again, whether that's a formal setting or whether it is something that, I can provide a space for and it just happens, then that's the goal.
Yeah, because I love that. I heard recently someone say, don't wait for someone to reach down and pull you up to their level. Make things with your friends. Right. Make things with your peers.
Absolutely,
and just all come up together, like the Wes Andersons and all these people that like make things with people that they work with over and over and over again. I think that's so special.
And I got like, recently I had a screenplay and it got like, they were like, we're not making that. And the reason we're not making it is these 4 things. And then we all went away and we were like, they're the 4 things we love. We're going to double down, triple down, quadruple down on those 4 things. Like, fuck you.
Yeah, I love that. Yes.
And they were the 4 things that made it interesting. So, so it's kind of like that, like LA right now, like everyone's worried about jobs. Everyone's worried about all these things, politics, like we can go on and on, but now is the time, right? When your back is against the wall to shift.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Oh yeah. We'll definitely have all the details for your workshop in the show notes, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that. Would you say that your workshop that you're launching is kind of an evolution from the factory and Bow Street in Ireland?
Yeah. I guess exactly. I mean, that's my backstory. Is well, just from sets, from theater to film to the factory to Bow Street, and now I'm in LA. I'm like, why not create a space where magic can happen?
Yeah, absolutely.
As you know, a lot of our audience are actors. We'd even get to Robin Williams. You worked
Oh
with
wow,
Cillian
yeah.
Murphy when he was in his mid-20s. Cillian Murphy, were you ever surprised that he won an Oscar?
Nope.
Okay.
No way. Absolutely zero surprise.
Okay.
Like
Okay.
so written on the cards. At the same time though, like there's a lot of people I would feel that way about who haven't yet.
Yeah.
There's a lot of actors I've worked with. I think Killian though takes the craft incredibly seriously. Like you can tell from day one. He was like vicious in a good way about pushing back, but in a great way. Like he was the opposite of okay, whatever you say. And I remember being like, wow, this is keeps me on my toes. But it's part of the reason I think why his that drive is very strong.
Sorry, I have to ask. So, in what way? Because both of you were fairly young. In what way was he able to viciously protect his art and his craft, but also not throw you off or offend you?
Yeah. Yeah, good question. I mean, it's kind of like the way I would be like, I wake up in the morning and I think I have to not fail Enda's words. I think I was so aware that Killian did not want to fail Pig, the character. So it's got nothing to do with Killian's ego versus my ego versus what the director and the actor are. It was not that. It was Pig saying like, I can't do that. And me being like, oh shit, right. Okay, I have to listen to this. This is so it was coming from that place, and I guess that's the difference. When it comes from an ego place, it's a whole different story. And I'm sure you guys, you can smell that a mile away. It's all horse shit. And if we have to do that stupid dance, then fine. But I think if you cast properly, like that's my whole thing, cast properly, and you won't be in that stupid waste of space.
Yeah, because I think that
great.
that ego space is underpinned by self-centered fear. Always, it's always
Always.
fear.
But sometimes covered in so many layers that
Yeah,
you're wasting hours of the crew's time and the money, and you're going, oh my God.
yeah.
It's tricky.
Yeah. I remember early on talking about ego, and like I remember very early on, Shimmy Marcus, who Kirsten obviously knows well, he directed an ad that I was in, and I remember I had to wear a shower cap in the ad. Well, one of them, we did a series of stings for like The Simpsons or something and HB ice cream. So I had to wear a shower cap, and I was like, oh, come on, man, I look like an idiot. And he goes, if you're worried about how you look, you've already lost. And I was like, oh my God, I was so embarrassed. I was like, oh my God, he's right. So grateful to him for saying that, because it's just one of those things that stuck in my head forever, I was like,
So, I have to ask about directing Robin Williams. So, August Rush is another feature you directed. It was a great movie. Jonathan Rhys Meyers, Kerry Russell. Can you talk a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, I mean that was so I went from Disco Pigs, which was a low budget indie that like was produced by, someone who I was like, oh, my friends are doing this with me, like I felt like Irish people, we all know each other. Then the next thing I got was like a $30 million Warner Brothers budget with like a crew of hundreds. And I would try to run away from the crew with like the actors and the cinematographer and be like, let's go make the movie over here in the corner. They won't notice,
Yeah.
because you're so not light on your feet when you have that kind of huge dinosaur of a production, like it's so hard to move that, like you can't just turn around and be like, let's go over there, and that indie sense was something that I really loved. But in saying all that, like, I mean, I think I have an unlikely trajectory, and I think it really is like not many people have like the good nepotism factor that I have, like In America had come out, and and I think Disco Pigs had obviously come out, and the combo of those two things, like, so it's kind of interesting because it's like Disco Pigs, I was like, I feel like that was my work, and In America, I'm like, that's more kind of branding slash marketing slash, and so, but both of those things are just a reality that are helpful in this world. And so I think the combo of both of those things is what got me in the door for August Rush. But it was an interesting one because the producer was the one who it was almost based on his own child. The moment where the baby is born and he's conducting was like a moment that happened for the producer. So I was in this interesting position of like trying to bring the producer's vision to the screen, almost more than my own. So like, I loved it. I loved it. I loved this acting. I loved the music. I loved being part of it, but it didn't feel like an auteur movie in that sense,
Right.
Makes sense.
And I don't know if that movie would be made nowadays, like at that budget level. I think no way. We were very lucky that the head of the studio just happened to be a major music buff and took that script and our project under his wing. Yeah, so I don't know. Like, if you're trying to make that movie now, maybe you'd be making it for like 10 million. I don't know.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
It's such a different dynamic with the output.
So I was just gonna say, do you guys like turn on the streamers? I won't even go there on which exact ones, and are like, there's hundreds of movies I've never heard of. When did they make them? Who is in them? What are they about? They all kind of look the same on each streamer, has their own particular brand. And it's just like, maybe they're good, but what's going on?
I absolutely. There's so much noise. I find it really hard to pick. Yeah. Like, I find it almost impossible to pick a movie, specifically a movie, because I think shows, you'll hear a lot more about shows sometimes because people go, oh, you have to watch this, or you have to watch the show. And like,
it's impossible to find them because there's like 20 different streamers and channels you have to sign up for.
Exactly.
Yeah. So to wrap up on this, because so you worked with incredible actors, incredible cast. Can you talk about how you kind of used your experiences to teach actors, and if you have any tips for actors? Let's start with self-tapes. What are a few main things that you look for or really resonate with?
It's such a contradiction because I'm like, I'm trying to talk about teaching actors in a school, and I hate the word teach. I hate the word act, and I hate the word school. I'm like, how am I supposed to say this is something that I'm interested in doing when I can't even use the words? So
that's hilarious.
That's a good place to start. You just don't like those 3 words.
Yeah, I don't like to think of myself as a teacher. I like to think of myself as someone who just clears a path for what you're going to bring to the table. And then acting, obviously, like, it's like how to not act, right? So like,
don't get caught acting.
Don't get caught acting. Yeah. So I suppose it is a world of self-tapes, right? Like, I hate to say it, but I still do see self-tapes where I'm like, I can't believe they're not in focus with bad lighting and bad sound. Like, I know that that's so basic, but it must need to be repeated. Like, that's wild.
Yeah.
That's such a basic thing. But I guess, I've spoken to a lot of actors about self-tapes, and I love them because it takes me just like a second to get a vibe, like maybe 10 seconds to get a vibe off an actor, The only thing the hardest thing for me is when they're good at acting. And so, but you're like, where's the real person so that I can get a sense, like I'm always telling actors this one piece of advice, and I actually don't know if it's good for like career and audition and casting directors, but obviously you get your sides, right? And the scene is usually one note. Like, it's a scene where you're angry, or it's a scene where you're breaking up, or it's one of these things. And so I'm always like, how do we put an arc on that scene so that there's 3 emotions that we hit, very different emotions. And even if it makes no fucking sense that you would be smiling in the middle of the breakup scene, it still does, because you're now masking all of the pain because you're smiling, right? So I'm always trying to, like, as a director, I'm like, I can't tell range in these self-tapes and these audition tapes, because they're either written bad sometimes, or they're just a slice of a moment that, yeah, you're angry. I mean, the worst thing to see is a scene where someone's angry. I have no idea if you can act if you're just being an angry, right? Yeah.
Yeah, we
that
kind
make
of call
great.
that, it absolutely makes sense, because we call that sort of, you know, at where we take classes at Leslie Kahn, they just call that like state of being. You're just playing a state of being, like angry.
Yes, it's generally like from denial to tapping into the fear and vulnerability, and then to truth. You know what I mean? Like, but those three things are polar opposites of each other. So at least you're showing you can go from one to another. You know?
Yeah.
I love that. And on that note, you said something about you know, you could tell if someone is a good actor, but you didn't get a sense of them. How would you describe that? Like, is it just purely, is it kind of like this sixth sense, as far as I know that they have an incredible craft, but also I actually see their essence? It's
Yeah.
kind of, it's still ambiguous to try to put words to it in a way, right?
Right, exactly. And like there's some actors who are, you know, so good at what they do that sometimes you're, you know, I guess they'd be more some of the stars, I guess, but you're like, wow, like it's so perfectly tuned, you know, but sometimes the mistakes are also interesting. Sometimes, you know, things come alive in that change, you know, so like I can appreciate the craft, but like exactly where can I see the essence of the actual person in there somewhere, you know? And like I do this silly thing where like when I was shooting, and especially when I did this crazy experimental improv movie, where I would roll on the actors all the time without them knowing, you know, and then we'd watch the takes or we'd watch the edit and they'd be like, Jesus, that's a mad moment. And I'd be like, yeah, because it's 5 minutes before I called action. Like it's you sitting,
Amazing.
is you sitting at the back garden or whatever, thinking about the scene. And it's the most magical moment because, you know, you're
I
just
love
so
that.
in it. And I would just, yeah, I'm not going to say what my tricks were to do that.
No, but that's great.
I think they appreciated I was doing it out of the corner that, you know, yeah. And that's just because they're so unguarded in that moment, right? It's very
Yeah.
hard to be unguarded with a camera in your face.
I worked with a director a couple of years ago on a short thing, Bryce Dallas Howard, and she was telling me a story about working with Clint Eastwood, and he wouldn't ever say action.
I never say action. Like I hate saying action, and I always do end boards on set. I hate headboards. I hate makeup checks. I always work with a makeup artist who's like chill, who I'm like, no checks, and she's like, no checks. You know, like, yeah, unless there's like a major issue, you know, because it just all adds up to this like moment of artifice, right? Where you're like, and go, be chill.
Yeah, you go, be real, and then the slap, you know, like the sound of the board, and like the
Yeah,
it is.
totally.
I have to ask one more. So when you're auditioning, what do you think about actors changing your words?
Ooh.
If you're watching an audition.
I personally have no problem with that. You know, like I think if an actor is a real handful, you'll hear about it beforehand, you know, and if they're worth it, then they're worth it. And you're like, oh shit, I have to tell the producer they're going to have fun here, you know, but you know, I mean, I know I might be giving the wrong advice because I've heard across the board how directors like are, and I'm just not that way. So like, I don't want to say like, but for me, I just like people actually speaking to me like a human, and like whether that's a pushback or a question or a I don't know what to do here, or do you mind if I change all the words? Like I'll be like, no, because I'll just do what I want on the day. Like I'm going to be the one in the edit room making all the choices. Like, so there's nothing wrong with letting people. Actually, you were asking about Robin earlier. Robin would always do 3, 4, 5 takes, and then he'd always be like, just give me 1 or 2. And I'd be like, of course. And he'd go insane, you know? And, you know, it was like, he just needed that. That was his thing. And like, imagine saying, no, you can't have your own, like,
Sorry, no way, mate.
Moving on.
Yeah. Too much of your time, but I'd love to, if you want to say anything about your very exciting upcoming project.
There's a few. I'm like, oh, there's a few of them. Well, there's one I was talking about recently. I've been trying to do Grace O'Malley, who's an Ireland's kind of iconic pirate queen. Her story of her life, and there was this incredible moment in time where she met Queen Elizabeth, and so it's this story of these two women in a room together for like 2 weeks, a week, 2 weeks, and there's 800 years of hatred in the room with them, and they manage to find a way through, as both of them as kind of equals and leaders, and it's about motherhood and leadership and vulnerability and wounding and all these things. So
yeah.
I'm kind of in love with that story. So that's something that I'm anxious to get off the ground next.
I love
That's
that.
exciting.
I love that. And it speaks to what you talked about with Say Nothing, where you're kind of zeroing in on a very personal experience that, you know, is also universal. Like that's the magic of it, I think.
And the question now, I think, being like, is there a way to have power and lead and not turn into a dictator or, you know, like, is there a way to keep your humanity and your soul and your vulnerability and lead an entire country? Like, it's a question. Like right now, looking around at the world leaders, that's a big question.
Yeah, TBD.
Yeah.
Like,
I know. We're trying to figure that out.
Yeah, maybe we look to the past for people who could do it for a moment, so that we can learn how to do it again.
And what are the best ways to stay in contact with you? We're gonna put the website to your workshop and your own website in the show notes.
Perfect.
Is that the best way to?
Yeah, that's
Okay,
perfect.
great.
Yeah, that's great.
KirstenSheridan.net, everyone.
do you want to do a hidden gem?
No, this is great. So, Kirsten, we talked about it. If you have a hidden gem, we would love that. And we'll spit one out too.
Right now, what I'm doing, as people can't see, I am Googling because I forgot the name of it. Okay.
Oh, yeah. No worries.
I'm so excited for this one as well, by the way.
It's an Irish thing. It's in our group chat, Rian. We have a group chat with 300 Irish people.
We do. Of our closest friends.
Really? How do you get into that club? You got to be Irish?
Just got to be Irish. That's it. Irish in LA. That's the only criteria. All
we do is talk about tea and different types of tea and where to get the best tea.
That's pretty accurate.
Yeah, exactly. But there's a place that has what we call a 99, which is an ice cream that me and Rian would have had in the awful 80s and in the 90s, and then when we were drunk in the 2000s, and then like I get them for my kids now, in this decade. But it's basically soft serve ice cream, and you get an Irish flake, which is a bar of chocolate, which from Cadbury's, and you put the flake into the ice cream. So it's a soft serve ice cream with a chocolate flake in the middle of it. And yes, this can take up hours of group chat time.
I saw that you mentioned it. And I was like, 99. I Googled it real quick. And I was like, oh, I see now. And it looks delicious.
Oh, absolute childhood staple.
I know what it is. It's called, which is a very Irish name, it's called Smashed AF.
Oh, there you go.
Wow.
And it's Smashed Burgers. It's in Burbank, Riverside Drive in Burbank. And it's burgers, but with the 99s. So burgers and chips.
Wow. I didn't even know that was there.
Yeah.
I live very, very close by to that. And it's Irish? The establishment?
I think it's Irish owned. I'm pretty sure. It was going to be a chip shop, like actual fish and chips Irish, I think. But then they went for the smashed burgers and the 99s.
What a hidden gem. I know. That's better than Rian's.
Proper hidden gem. Have you found, because so Irish chippers are kind of I haven't found anything outside of Ireland that tastes remotely close.
Nope. And that's the end of the podcast.
Yeah. Nope. Thanks. Good night. King's. I don't know if the King's Head shop. Maybe this is going to be my hidden gem because I've never mentioned it before. But I do go down there quite a bit. There's a shop in the King's Head pub in Santa Monica which sells a load of Irish stuff. Mm-hmm. There's Englishy stuff in there, but there's a ton of Irish stuff in it too, and it's like you know, everything from like there's Cadbury's chocolate. There's like they import a load of stuff. There's like sausages and rashers and stuff if you want to make a fry. There's a lot of that's going to be my hidden gem because Kirsten has inspired me and I should have brought this back.
I knew Rio was going to forget, but I love that. So we'll keep it LA local. I'll throw one out. So this is actually an Italian name, but it's Al Antico Veneo. It's an Italian sandwich shop. Now, here's the thing. They actually started one. It's from Italy. They opened one up in K-Town in Los Angeles, and I think they have a second location in Beverly Hills. The thing is I actually tried it here in Manhattan. So there's a handful ones in Manhattan. So incredible. My sister, who's a diehard New Yorker, said it's the best sandwich she's had in New York, and she's raving about it. So.
Wow,
LA, there's one in K-Town, and I believe there's one in Beverly Hills. Al Antico Veneo and authentic Italian deli sandwiches. So, yeah. So we have 3
Fantastic.
LA hidden gems, everyone.
You guys we need to get your sponsorship going with these guys. I'd be like, okay.
Someday.
And so now, come on, cough up.
firing out free publicity like suckers.
We've been waiting for free stuff. One of these days.
Yeah, at least some free stuff. Well, I suspect you might get a free 99. Let's hope. Let's go there and say, hey.
If I get one free 99, it's all been worth it. This whole podcast experiment has all been worth it.
All right. Well, this has been great, Kirsten. So thankful that you could do this.
It's been magic. Yeah, it's been amazing.
Great. Thank you, guys.